everyone, and for who don't know who is WSROC, WSROC is the Western Sydney Regional Organization of Councils. We have 9 councils from Cumberland, Parramatta to the West Blue Mountains. You may all know the Western Sydney faced a really rapid development rate. Oh, okay. Sorry, yep. And the forecast is that over the next 40 years, more than half of the population growth in Sydney will be in Western Sydney. For Parramatta alone, in the next 10 years, will over 1 million people settle in Parramatta. That is the population of the Adelaide. Can you imagine in the next 10 years, the entire Adelaide move to Parramatta? That is what we face in what's the situation in Western Sydney. And this population growth results in the significant increase in the number of the residential flat buildings development in the region. And some forecasts says the ratio of the mass to size in some area of the Western Sydney will increase up to 19% in the next 2 years. And our councils already face this challenge, and for the transitions to the media and the high density livings already gave a lot of challenge for our councils. Most of our councils have already seen the significant increase in numbers of the residential flat building. the development application submitted to council for assessment. And these waste planning issues has been raised as issues in almost every single waste managers meeting in the last couple of the years. That's why we formed the waste planning forums and bring the 13 councils together from both MacRock and the WSROC to discuss the issues and to share the learnings and informations. We also talk to other Sydney Metro ROCs and also the New South Wales EPA. And we found it's not only Western Sydney councils, and for most of the Sydney councils, they also face the same problem. They're also looking for the solutions. They're also looking for the guidance to assess the development application for those residential flat buildings. But currently, the only document available to councils is the EPA Better Practice Smart Guide, which was published 10 years ago. And this guide, they have some information. They have the good examples of the better practice, but really have the limited information on the infrastructure. So our council needs a guide. They need more information to make the decisions, make the informed decisions in their residential flat buildings development and increase recycling to in their IFBs. So what we're gonna do, we took the actions and we undertake this research. We want to give the council more information to let them to make the right decision and for them to easy to make the decisions, and then to improve their waste management performance. And in the very early stage of this project, we sent the questionnaire to all the councils, WSROC and MacRock councils, to ask their feedback on the main barriers to the better waste management and also the common issues. And the limitation of the current planning framework came out as one of the main barriers to the planning work, to this waste management. And you may all know, and waste, not like water and energy, the waste is not an essential service to the public. That means the waste may not the active part of the environmental assessment process. And also the DCPs. Every council have their own DCPs. WSROC reviewed and compared 15 councils' DCPs in 2016, and to identify the similarities and also differences. And then, but this inconsistency in the DCP across the LGAs also make the council to face more challenge for their waste planning. And also for large-scale residential flat buildings development, and can be identified as a state significant development. So it can be approved by the state, but not compliant with council's DCP. And also the council's DCP will not be necessarily stand up in the court as a minimum compliance requirement. All these challenges, all these barriers to make council to face these planning issues every day. And I won't go through the details of the common issues because Marie and Wayne already talked about a lot of these issues, but this is problems our council faced every day to provide service to the residential flat buildings. And so that's why we engaged the Jacobs to undertake this research. And we wanted to make sure this research covered all the aspects of the infrastructures, not only the engineering solution and the proposed, the engineering part or the proposed solution. We also want to know the usabilities by the residents, the ongoing maintenance by the building managers, and also the interrelationship with council's services, including the curbside service and the management of the litter, illegal dumping, and also the household problem waste. So this project involved in the desktop research and also the consultation with the case stakeholders, such as the property developers, building managers, building cleaners, and also the EPA staff, council staff, the waste collection contractors, to ask their opinions on these technologies and infrastructures, and also the site visit. And 12 fact sheets and a research report were developed from this project for our council. And Tanya will give you more details about the research outcomes.
Thank you, Wendy. So site visits were carried out sort of as a ground truthing exercise to review the different types of infrastructure and the everyday challenges faced by building managers. It was also an opportunity to learn about different educational approaches and to consult council officers, building managers and cleaners. This slide provides an overview of the buildings visited. Typically we saw on average buildings with floors between 5 and 9 floors high. There was one building that we visited that was 20 buildings high. We were limited by this, the scope of the study, and we wanted to focus on the Western Sydney region as well. So we did the best that we could within that time, but for context, Parramatta is seeing, I think, about 20 new RFBs proposed, and a lot of them will range between 25 and 55 floors, so there's significant challenges there, higher in City of Sydney area, and Chute also in the Sydney area, seeing those bigger buildings going through. And the types of infrastructure that we saw, traditional bin systems, with bins on the ground floor or in interim waste rooms, single garbage chutes with recycling crates on each floor, dual chutes, so your garbage chutes and your recycling chutes side by side, multi-stream diverter chutes. We also looked at bin feed systems, so your carousel and linear bin track systems at the base of the chute, whether or not they had in-bin compactors with that arrangement, and also turntables. I've got a few case studies just to demonstrate the different challenges faced by different buildings. This one's located in North Sydney. It's 20 floors high, 242 units. It's a mixture of owner-occupied, so about 50-50 owner-occupied and tenanted. There's one garbage chute and crates, recycling crates on each floor. There's a 5-bin carousel at the bottom of the chute and an in-bin compactor. In terms of chute blockages, they get 4 a month. Education, I would say, is quite well done. They have an intranet system. The building manager takes calls, personal calls. They have SMS alerts, that sort of thing. The recycling levels probably quite okay, but they can monitor the crates. It's less anonymous, so they can monitor the crates, and the cleaners pull out plastic bags when they can. But the plastic bags are still an issue. And there's a picture there of polystyrene being collected in big bags as well for separate collection. Staff resource-wise, 10% of the building manager's time is spent on waste, and about 40% of the cleaner's time is spent on waste. During early occupation, some of the challenges faced by this building, and not common to most buildings, is that they have a huge amount of cardboard and polystyrene as people are occupying the building and unpacking, as you say, IKEA goods and that sort of thing. And council systems aren't good enough generally to cope with that amount. So in this case, they used a builder's skip to get rid of those materials. Case study 2, located in Fairfield, quite an old building, about 10 to 12 years old, 12 floors high. Another building is about to go up at the end of that laneway, a very narrow laneway. Council needs to use a special smaller sized truck to actually get in and collect from this area, and lots of problems with people parking on the road and in the area where the bins need to be collected from, and not a lot of space for bins generally, or manoeuvrability of bins for the building manager. Highly transient tenants, lots of refugees coming into Fairfield before they settle in other areas. So there's about 350 people in this building and about 3.5 people per unit, which is quite a large stat for this. So the building manager has a huge challenge dealing with education in this building. There's one garbage chute. There's no recycling currently because other priorities are taking over from that. There's a 5-bin carousel and an in-bin compactor down the bottom. Chute blockages about 6 times or more per month. Mixed education, the building manager does follow up as much as they can, but they have massive issues with illegal dumping and the collection arrangements as well. So he has to balance his time, and there's tenants moving in and out all the time. So staff resource-wise, he spends more than 50% of his time on waste, probably 75% or so. He spends a lot of time unblocking chutes, and he has stories of having to use, generally they have their own pole to unblock chutes. He's had to unblock about 4 stories high worth of waste, he said, and so the waste has just toppled down into the room. It's not a very safe environment for him. And he also deals with bin breakages, so I think on a rate of about 5 per month, something's seriously going on there. And another case study is Wolli Creek, Bayside. It's quite a new building again, only a few months since occupation when I visited, 8 to 10 floors high. It's 75% owner-occupied, and there's a diverter. They have diverters within this building. Chute blockages-wise, they had 4 initially. They've actually managed to reduce that to 1 per month. I think that's because their education level is very high. They do a lot of face-to-face communications with all of the residents, the tenants, and they have an intranet system, and they're very ongoing with it. But it is a new building, so we'll wait to see if that can be sustained. So similar resource levels to the first case study that I talked about, and commercial hadn't come into the ground floor at the time, and that was their only waste room, so we're yet to see what they're going to do with the commercial waste when that happens. Just some examples of the educational signage that we saw. This is a great example from Fairfield Council that uses colour coding. It's multilingual, and it's quite clear what to do with your different materials using images rather than words. But I'd like to impress that if you're moving from one building to the other, as I was doing during these site visits, but also as tenants are doing as they move from building to building, they're seeing a whole range of brilliant educational material, but the layout is very different. And I think that really can affect their ability to absorb the material. So I think a consistent sort of layout is quite important there, so that it's immediately familiar to them. And chute signage, often the building managers are just coming up with their own signage, and they're developing it over a number of months to try and achieve different success rates with their chutes. Not a lot of council signage seen there, and not a lot of similarities again in the format used. Desktop study-wise, we looked at Australian and overseas trends. All the cities really are facing similar challenges. So in Australia, we've seen above-ground compactors being used and communal recycling hubs in Melbourne. It's a different approach, and they've got precinct criteria that they use to determine if that's applicable to a certain area. And of course, that's mixing with commercial uses as well. Underground stationary vacuum collection systems have been, feasibility studies have been done by Sydney councils. We know Sunshine Coast Council is implementing one currently, so it'd be great to see what's happening there. I think Adelaide's also done a feasibility study, so there's more councils considering this, where you've got residential and commercial uses, waste that you can bring together. And underground and semi-underground bins have been trialled in Sydney, so City of Sydney and I think Fairfield as well. Overseas, we know London and Scotland and Italy have put in underground and semi-underground bins. They're quite popular over there. In Canada, the Try-Sorter Chute for 3 streams with mixed results. A lot of areas over in Europe and also Asia Pacific are moving to vacuum systems for their very high-story residential buildings. And in America, they have chutes and above-ground compactors. They're also exploring vacuum options. So the fact sheets, I just quickly list the ones that we've got. These are available online, but we covered traditional bin systems, single and dual chutes, multi-stream diverter systems, underground bins, hydraulic and crane lifted, underground compactors, primarily on hydraulic platforms, above ground compactors with bin lifts, stationary vacuum systems, so underground vacuum systems with a central waste terminal, mobile vacuum systems that require a specialised vacuum truck, and turntables, food organics dehydrators that turn food waste into a soil-like output, and bulky household waste solutions for e-waste and polystyrene and that sort of thing. And then finally, we prepared a fact sheet overview which provides cost information, which is indicative only, but it's just there to provide a platform to pull information from, and then extra investigation needs to be taken from there. Just an example of the layout. So we provided technical information on the left, and some information on suitable building types around the heights and that sort of thing for the buildings. Education needs, that was stressed as quite an important thing to cover. So we've included information there. We've provided strengths and weaknesses, compliance considerations, and case study information. And just another example for turntables as well. And this is just information pulled from the overview fact sheet. I won't go into detail, but we had to make some assumptions here to provide the costs. So it's an indicative guide only, but essentially the assumptions we've made to provide the upfront costs and the maintenance costs, we've assumed small to large builds with small buildings 4 to 7 floors and large buildings 12 plus floors. Also, I'd just like to note that vacuum systems, the costs are extremely dependent on a range of factors, and OPEX is largely related to electrical costs, so it's not necessarily fair to compare to the type of maintenance costs I've provided on the overview fact sheet. We've provided some information on indicative staff resource requirements for each. Where you see an asterisk, we had anecdotal evidence which suggests that you require a few more staff resources. And we've provided expected lifetime considerations. Lessons learned. Most importantly, as far as I'm concerned, the building manager's role. So council intervention at early design phases and before the occupational certificate phase, early design phase and the occupational certificate phase, very important, but also before body corporate is established. They have a very important role in communication, setting up a community, usually for their buildings, for their residents. They use a range of different means to communicate with their residents. Also, something else that was that they alerted me to, that were hire arrangements for their cleaners were really important. They should be hiring the cleaners so that they have direct communication with their cleaners and can monitor their performance. in some cases, a housing commission case study that I saw, the cleaners were actually hired separately, which meant that the building manager didn't have as much control over the cleaners. That sort of thing can provide extra challenges. Educational signage, I've already talked about the lessons there, that we need a bit more of a familiar layout across these residential flat buildings, and especially for chutes. To see lower contamination and recycling bins, it was obvious from these site visits that where bins or crates could be monitored in interim waste rooms, the recycling results were better. There was lower contamination, but we know that for higher buildings, the resourcing requirements around that can be quite difficult. In-bin compaction, compactors have to be monitored. They can't be left to continue on carousels because you see over-compaction happening. There's also safety issues during bin transfer and emptying that need to be clearly understood, and it's also a different service level. So for collection contractors, they're having to deal with trying to empty out compacted bins, which can be quite difficult for them. Maintenance of infrastructure, really important for ongoing costs and minimising them. Suitability of infrastructure for RFBs by height. We know it's case by case, but a general guide from our study was that below 10 floors, the bins, where you had bins on the ground floor where the building manager and the cleaners could monitor inputs, or where there were single chutes, garbage chutes with recycling crates on each floor, the recycling outcomes were better. Diverter chutes were okay, but they always needed an enhanced education system, and I think majority owner-occupied helped with that. Above 10 floors, you're looking at single chutes or dual chutes, and obviously vacuum systems, above ground compactors when you're going above a certain number of floors or units. And I'll just note that with the diverter chutes, there is evidence of delays, as Marie was saying, on other floors when the chute's in use, and blockages also lead to the inability of using both the garbage and the recycling function, so that enhanced education really needs to be there. And feasibility-wise, I've provided some information there. For above ground and underground compactors, we were told a minimum of 100 units from the equipment suppliers. Marie's provided some more information from a council consideration perspective, and vacuum systems a minimum of 1,000 units. Mobile vacuum and underground bins for unique situations only. Other factors we've already touched on in several of the other presentations, but for recycling chutes, you must provide separate bins for cardboard. Bulky waste must be in every building to collect things like e-waste and polystyrene and cardboard. And food waste, personally I think kitchen top bins and collections are the best option. Dehydrators only if you had extensive gardens to use this on. You can't sort of sell the product necessarily to other sites. And yeah, that was it I think. So thanks, I'll hand over to Wendy.
What are we going to do next? We will deliver the training to the council staff, and including the planning staff and the waste staff next week, or the week after, partner with WSROC to help them to assess the RFB's DA applications. And we also will help council, continue to help council to share the learnings and the experience with each other, and the more information and learning they share, the more discussion they had, the easier for the council to reach the common agreement on the threshold and acceptabilities of the infrastructures and service requirement. And we also will keep working with our councils and New South Wales EPA, LG New South Wales, and also other ROCs to provide our input to the better planning policy. And all the fact sheets are available to download from this link, and it's on our website, WSROC website. And thanks for your time. If you wanted to know more about this project, come to see me and Tanya after that. Thank you. Enjoy your